it's entirely possible that the only reason you're hearing this is because Donald Trump was too lazy to leave the golf course.
And in my mother's womb was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compacted in blood of the seed of man.
That's right.
Of the seed of man.
The word seed is sperm, and sperm comes through having sex.
It's shut out of your father's rod.
Right.
Put it in layman terms, in his penis.
That's right.
That means a man put his penis in a woman and bust off in it.
Then the angel said to him, "Take out the entrails of this fish, and lay up his heart and his gall and his liver for thee. For these are necessary for useful medicines."
The rest of the chapters of the book of Esther,
Go ahead.
which are found neither in the Hebrew nor in the Chaldee.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is in my lap demanding attention, and Buttons is either attacking a toy or gorging herself in the kitchen. I can't tell which. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. This is a Biblical Apocrypha episode where I and Skullbeard read a book or two from the Biblical Apocrypha. Next episode will be a news episode. Now, about the opening sting. As many of you might know, Hawaii had a false alarm that an incoming ballistic missile was headed their way. What you might not know is that when the alert was sent, Trump was on one of his golf courses. He didn't leave the course until after he'd finished playing, which was nearly an hour after the alert was sent. Did he know about the alert? Did he know that it was a false alarm? It took the state of Hawaii 20 minutes to announce that it had been a mistake. There was certainly nothing about it in any of Trump's tweets. This raises a number of questions. Was Trump informed about the alert while he was golfing? If not, why not? Is it because his staff knew nothing about it? If that's the case, we really ought to know why they didn't know anything about it. Did his staff know but not tell him for some reason? Do they think that he's not capable of understanding what such an alert means? If that's the case, then why the fuck is he still president? That should be grounds for an automatic removal right there. Did Trump relieve orders that he's not to be bothered while he's golfing? Again, if that's the case, he should be removed. If he was informed about the alert, what was he told? Did they tell him if it was an error? If they did, then why wasn't the general population informed of this? I don't have any answers to these questions, but I'm also not really seeing them being asked by anyone either. And they are kind of important. Okay, on to slightly more mundane things. First is that after some back and forth with HR at work, I managed to clear some hurdles about getting hired on. They were supposed to send me an email with a link to their hiring site so I could fill out a few things, but for whatever reason, I didn't get the link and had to get them to resend it to me. I took my drug test on Thursday, so in theory, when I go to work next, they'll have me fill out the paperwork to be a full-time employee. I'm not holding my breath, however. Even when I do get hired on full-time, I'll have to go through a 90-day probationary period where I can be fired fairly easily. I also need to mention that John, the host of the Packard Pokesat podcast, which you might recall I was a guest on some months back, has found himself in the awkward position of having to move in the middle of winter in Wisconsin. Apparently, the trailer park he lives in is shutting down, and he's got to find a new place to live and needs some financial help to make this happen. He's asking for folks to donate via PayPal to help him move. Having been in John's shoes before, though thankfully not having had to move in the middle of winter in Wisconsin, I can well sympathize with his plight. I'll have a link to where you can donate to help him in the show notes for this episode. Now, before we get to more of 2nd Maccabees, which I know you're terribly excited about, there's a couple of things I need to point out about the section we're reading. One is that because it's freaking cold in Canada right now, the audio gets a bit wonky in spots as Skullbeard's furnace kicks on and off. I've done what I can to clean the audio up, but you'll still hear some weird bits every now and then. The second is that just by reading the text, it is impossible to tell when this is supposed to have taken place. It talks about historical figures interacting with one another who couldn't have possibly met. One of the people appears to be someone who lived during the Trojan War, which happened roughly in 1200 BCE. And they're the father of someone who lived in approximately 300 BCE. And it's describing what sounds like the Babylonian sack of Jerusalem, which happened in around 600 BCE. According to Wikipedia, though, Second Maccabees is about a Jewish revolt which happened in roughly 180 BCE. None of which explains why people who couldn't have been alive at the time are mentioned in the text. I'll have a link to the wiki article in the show notes so you can check it out. If any of you can make sense of this, let me know, because neither Skullbeard or I could understand it. With that out of the way, let's get to more of the confusing morass of Second Maccabees.
2 Mac 4. This Simon now, of whom we spake afore, having been a betrayer of the money and of his country, slandered Onias as if he terrified Heliodorus and been the worker of these evils. Thus,
I'm
gonna guess had, as if he had terrified Heliodorus. Makes more sense.
And Heliodorus, depending on who you're talking about, could have been some asshole who lived in 187 BCE, or some guy who lived in 250s AD. But interestingly enough, the name Heliodorus means gift of the sun.
Of course it does.
And that's S-U-N, not S-O-N.
Yep. Thus was he bold to call him a traitor, that had deserved well of the city, and tendered his own nation, and was so zealous of the laws. But when their hatred went so far, by one of Simon's faction murders were committed. It's like the same plot over and over.
Yeah. Onias, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Apollonius, as being the governor of Seleucia and Phenice, did rage and increase Simon's malice. Okay. He went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. And I love how they spell public with a K. For he saw that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet, and Simon leave his folly, unless the king did look thereunto.
But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise, and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians.
Sounds good to me.
So he wants his own private dojo?
Yeah. Now, here's the weird thing. I looked up Seleucus because that name sounded vaguely familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, the dates don't match up with...
with Heliodorus, or...
Yeah, Seleucus lived circa 358 BCE to 281 BCE. And, well, let me just send you this link to the wiki article, because you have to see the picture of the statue of him. I mean, we're talking crazy eyes here.
Why is my computer so goddamn slow tonight?
Because you touch yourself. That's why.
I thought Jesus loved me. Whatever. Not that way, Jesus.
You make the baby Jesus cry.
Every chance I get. That's one pissed off looking dude.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it's like, really? That's the image you went with, you know?
Which chapel was it where the old lady touched up the picture of Jesus?
Oh, yeah, it was somewhere in Spain. I know the one you're talking about. It just turned into a blob with eyes.
Mm-hmm. More or less.
Yeah. All right. When the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion.
I bet you they had some extra virgin olive oil.
Something like that. I mean, you know, what was the, how's the old joke go? What was the motto of the Greeks that fought in the Falkland Islands? Save the sheep. And then there's other implications of Greek, but we won't go there. The sheep fucking is bad enough.
And I did. I have a quick aside on sheep. When I did guide school, the guy that ran the school was an Aussie, and one of my classmates was from New Zealand. So they had this constant back and forth. Aussie safe sex, apparently. They paint a big red X on the back of the sheep that kick.
There was and I cannot find it. Gosh, this was 10 plus years ago or so. There was a cartoon, animated cartoon that was like Sex Around the World, right? And it had Sex in England, and it had this woman doing her nails while some guy's nailing her doggy style. And she's like, I'm thinking we might change the drapes in here. And it had, like a French couple in front of the Eiffel Tower and something or other. And it had other stuff. And the thing I'll never forget was it had like New Zealand, this guy kicks open a screen door and grabs his sheep. It starts going, and I can't find it anymore, which is so depressing.
Hey, McLeod, get off of my U.
Yeah.
All right, this isn't advancing error.
Yeah. And the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Eupolemus, whom I've never the fuck heard of before, who went, who went ambassador to Rome. That really, grammar, no. For amity and aid, he took away, and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. Whatever. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjugation, and made them wear a hat. Oh, you dastardly bastard. Was it a Magi hat? Make Jerusalem great again?
Yeah, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
Now, such was the height of Greek fashions, and increase of heathenish manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, and no high priest, that the priests had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowance of the city in the place of exercise, after the game of discus called them forth, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all. What?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I've looked up Eupolemus, or Eupolemus, however you pronounce it. He's the earliest Hellenistic Jewish historian whose work survives only in 5 fragments, or possibly in 6 fragments, in Eusebius of Caesarea's Preparatorio Evangelica, embedded in quotations from the historian Alexander Polyhistor and in the Stromata of Clement of Alexandria. Wow, this is some obscure esoteric shit.
Yeah, it's way out there.
Wow, and they can't even verify the quotations which have been attributed to this guy. Wow, and this guy claimed that Moses was the creator of the Hebrew alphabet. Wow, so this guy, actually, for him not being known is kind of a disservice considering what he, supposed to have done. He supposedly taught, he's supposedly the guy who said, Moses was the guy who taught the Jews how to write. He wrote some of the chronology about Jewish history from Moses to David. Wow. So.
You got a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So we're at verse 16.
16.
By reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of God. Well, actually, it's far easier for me not to stone an adulterer or somebody who's gay than it is for me to stone an adulterer or somebody who's gay, so I'm going to disagree with that statement right there off. But the time following shall declare these things. Now, when the game that was used every faith year was kept at Tyrus, the king being present. Okay, that was a weird segue.
This ungracious Jason sent special messengers from Jerusalem, who were Antiochians, to carry 300 drachms of silver to the sacrifice of Hercules, which even the bearers thereof thought fit not to bestow upon the sacrifice, because it was not convenient, but to the reserves for other charges. This money then, in regard of the sender, was appointed to Hercules' sacrifice, but because of the bearers thereof it was employed in the making of galleys. Now, when Apollonius, the son of Menestheus, was sent into Egypt for the coronation of King Ptolemaeus Philometor, Antiochus, understanding him not to be well affected to his affairs, provided for his own safety, whereupon he came to Joppa, and from thence to Jerusalem. So, wait, there was some skimming and what?
Yeah, and according to Wikipedia, Menestheus, if it's the right one, yeah, it is the right one, was some dude who lived during the Trojan War, which really throws off the chronology because, the Trojan War, man, I mean, we've dated that to like 1000 BC, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it was...
These guys are all over the place.
Yeah. I gotta look this up. Because, because, the Odyssey is one of my favorite books of all time. Okay. The dating for the Trojan War is between 1260 to 1180 BCE. So the chronology is just so bad. We are through the looking glass, Alice. We are through the looking glass.
Yeah, this is... I don't know. I think, in my not so humble opinion, I think they're just making a lot of this shit up. Recycling their stories, maybe?
Throwing in stuff that, references to Greek mythology in hopes that it'll give validity to what they're babbling about. Where he was honorably received of Jason. Would that be Jason of the Argonauts? I have no idea. And of the city, and was brought in with torch alight and with great shoutings. I'm sorry, I just, the Monty Python, the Holy Grail, and there was much rejoicing. And so afterward went with his host unto Phoenice. 3 years afterward, Jason sent Menelaus, the aforesaid Simon's brother, to bear the money unto the king and to put him in mind of certain necessary matters. Well, yes, we're going to, we kind of need toilet paper. But he being brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jason by 300 talents of silver. Okay, so douchebag is told, go to the king, kind of bribe him so we can get some toilet paper, and this guy, instead of getting the toilet paper, bribes the king so he becomes a priest.
Shakespeare couldn't make this shit up. So he came with the king's mandate. Phrasing. Bringing nothing worthy the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant and the rage of a savage beast. Then Jason, who had undermined his own brother, being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of the Ammonites. So Menelaus got the principality, but as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sostratus, the ruler of the castle, required it. Who the hell's this Sostratus guy?
Yeah, I've never, that's another name I've never heard.
It's like they keep bringing in all these other characters. Sostratus of Aegina, a Greek merchant, of Cnidus, a designer of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, of Dyme, Greek mythological hero and friend of Hercules, of Macedon, conspirator against Alexander, of Pallene, runner and of Olympic winner, and of Sicyon, an Olympic pancratiast. I have no idea what that is.
It's somebody who battles the pancreas.
Or
uses the martial arts style of the pancreas. They fling insulin to people.
Could be. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. For unto him appertained the gathering of the customs, wherefore they were both called before the king. Now Menelaus left his brother Lysimachus, who? In his stead in the priesthood, and Soratus left crates, like in shipping crates, not I'm a dumb fuck who doesn't know how to pronounce Crete, who was the governor of the Cyprians. While those things were in doing, they of Tarsus and Malos made insurrection, because they were given to the king's concubine called Antiochus. Every Antiochus I've ever heard of has been a dude, so the king is packing the fudge.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, but, if you're a rational human being, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're devoutly religious.
You got to throw rocks at him or something.
Yeah. And Lysimachus, according to Wikipedia, was a Macedonian officer who lived in around 306 BCE.
These guys are.
I don't think it's the same dude.
We can't do a timeline of this because it's basically just a scribble mark.
Yeah.
Okay, phrasing warning. Then came the king in all haste to appease matters, leaving Antiochus a man in authority for his deputy. Now Menelaus, supposing that he had gotten a convenient time, stole certain vessels of gold out of the temple and gave some of them to Andronicus, and some he sold into Tyrus and the cities round about, which when Onias knew of a surety, he reproved him, and withdrew himself into a sanctuary at Daphne that lieth by Antiochia.
Where the holy hand grenade comes from.
Yes.
Wherefore Menelaus, taking Andronicus apart, prayed him to get Onias into his hands. Phrasing, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Onias in deceit, gave him his right hand with oaths, and though he were suspected by him, yet persuaded he him to come forth of the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up without regard of justice. So, some dude went to some dude, cut him to pieces, prayed to somebody, then went to jerk off somebody else, and then stuck that guy into prison. That's the way it reads to me.
Your guess is as good as mine. There's something about a handy in there.
Yeah.
Sure.
For which the cause not only the Jews, but many also of other nations took great indignation, and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man.
And when the king was come again from the places about Cilicia, the Jews that were in the city, and certain of the Greeks that abhorred the fact also, complained because Onias was slain without cause. Therefore Antiochus was heartily sorry, and moved to pity, and wept, because of the sober and modest behavior of him that was dead. And being riddled with anger, forthwith he took away Andronicus his purple, and rent off his clothes, and leading him through the whole city unto that very place where he had committed impiety against Onias, there slew he the cursed murderer. Thus the Lord rewarded him his punishment as he had deserved. All right.
Okay.
Kind and loving God, I'm sure.
Now, when many sacrileges had been committed in the city by Lysimachus, with the consent of Menelaus, and the fruit thereof was spread abroad, the multitude gathered themselves together against Lysimachus, many vessels of gold being already carried away. I did not fuck that up. That is exactly how that does not segue right.
English, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Whereupon, the common people rising and being filled with rage, Lysimachus armed about 3,000 men, and begun first to offer violence, one Arianus being the leader, a man far gone in years, so send Grandpa Simpson out there, and no less in folly. They then, seeing the attempt of Lysimachus, some of them caught stones, some clubs, others taking handfuls of dust that was next at hand, cast them all together upon Lysimachus and those that sat upon him.
Okay, I did look up Lysimachus, and it looks like around 360 BC to 281 BC. Macedonian officer.
So we have a range of somewhere between the mid 300s BCE and the 1100s BCE.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Almost as if it didn't make sense. Thus many of them they wounded, and some they struck to the ground, and all of them they forced to flee. But as for the church robber himself, him they killed beside the treasury. Of these matters, therefore, there was an accusation laid against Menelaus. Now, when the king came to Tyrus, 3 men that were sent from the Senate pleaded the cause before him.
But Menelaus, being now convicted, promised Ptolemy, the son of Dorymenes, to give him much money if he would pacify the king toward him. Whereupon Ptolemy, taking the king aside into a certain gallery, as it were to take the air, brought him to be of another mind, insomuch that he discharged Menelaus from the accusations, who, notwithstanding, was the cause of all the mischief, and those poor men who, if they had told their cause, yea, before the Scythians, they should have been judged innocent, them he condemned to death.
Of course he did. So there was a bribe, and I'm not sure what's in the air there, and a miscarriage of justice. Very nice. Thus they that followed the matter for the city, and for the people, and for the holy vessels, did soon suffer unjust punishment. Wherefore even they of Tyrus, moved with hatred of that wicked deed, caused them to be honorably buried. And so through the covetousness of them that were in power, Menelaus remained still in authority, increasing in malice, and being a great traitor to the citizens. I wonder if he was orange with a comb.
Could be.
About the same time, Antiochus prepared his second voyage into Egypt. And then it happened that throughout all the city, for the space almost of 40 days, there were seen horsemen running in the air in cloth of gold and armed with lances like a band of soldiers, and troops of horsemen in array, encountering and running one against another, with shaking of shields and multitude of pikes and drawing of swords and casting of darts and glittering of gold ornaments and harness of all sorts.
Okay, this...
Like all sorts?
Yeah. Well, this raises a couple of questions. Now, as I've noted way back when I was doing Doan's book, 40 is common across a number of religions. But there's no logical reason that I've been able to ascertain explicitly as to why 40 is a common number. 3, I can actually tell you because 3 shows up in all these various religions. That's actually understandable because around the time of the solstice, the sun appears to rise in the same spot for 3 days.
Yep.
And you have, for 7, well, that's, you've got 7 planets that the ancients knew about, or celestial bodies they referred to as planets.
Okay.
So that gives that commonality. But 40, I haven't really been able to pin down. There's a method of counting on your fingers that will yield 40, and somebody pointed out that, well, that's twice which you could possibly get by counting on your fingers and toes. So that may be it, but I've never been able to really pin down anything conclusive. And according to Wikipedia, the pike didn't show up into use until, the Middle Ages. Interesting, because when I up Antiochus' second journey into Egypt, I got Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes. 215 to 164 BC. Yeah. So, anachronistic much? Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, now we'll go into this digression because it's more interesting than anything we're going to read here.
Yes, it is.
One of the things that has caught my attention, because I listened to, David Michael doing the Book of Mormon, and now the Scathing Atheist guys are doing Book of Mormon, and both of them have pointed out that, the Book of Mormon references the word steal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you read Robert Fitzgerald's translation of the Odyssey, and possibly others, you will see that he uses the word steal. Even though the metal was unknown to the Greeks who would have, fought the Trojan War, let alone the Greeks who lived centuries later who actually wrote down the Iliad and the Odyssey. But what he was trying to imply by the use of the word steal was that it was a high quality sword. And, I mean...
Yeah, but it would have still been bronze or possibly iron at that point.
But have you ever heard... let me look this up because I will not be able to do it right unless I do, because it's a weird metal. I'd never heard of it, even as a machinist, until fairly recently. And there it is. There's the name. Auriculum. And I bet you have no idea what the fuck that is.
I have no idea whatsoever what that is.
Yeah, auriculum, it's... Plato talks about it like that's what the roofs in Atlantis were made out of. It's this weird bronze alloy. Let me pull this up. It was like 75% copper, 15% zinc, a little bit of lead, a little bit of nickel, and a little bit of iron. So... probably when Fitzgerald in the Odyssey is using the word steal, he means auriculum. But how many fucking people would know that word? But they'd all know steal, and they'd all know that it was really rare, really an exceptional metal.
So it's a translation error? Or
not a translation error. It's more in finding a word which keeps with the spirit of the original rather than being a literal rendering of the original.
All right.
So, if that makes sense.
Well, most of the links that I'm getting searching for auriculum are for some death metal band. Interesting. And my furnace is running, so I've got myself muted most of the time.
Yeah. Well, there, I dropped the link to the wiki entry on it. Wherefore every man prayed that apparition might turn to good. Now when there was gone forth a false rumor, as though Antiochus had been dead, Jason took at the least 1,000 men. He might have been 1,001, might have been 1,040. We just don't really know, but it was definitely at least 1,000. And suddenly made an assault upon the city. And they that were upon the walls being put back, and the city at length taken. Menelaus fled into the castle. But Jason slew his own citizens. That's not really a thing to inspire loyalty to your king. Without mercy, not considering that to get the day of them, of his own nation, would be a most unhappy day for him. Okay? But thinking they had been his enemies and not his countrymen whom he conquered. So Jason apparently has PTSD or some kind of traumatic brain injury and doesn't realize he's killing his friends.
Or maybe he's just some kind of fuck up.
Yeah.
Howbeit, for all this he obtained not the principality, but at the last received shame for the reward of his treason, and fled again into the country of the Ammonites. In the end, therefore, he had an unhappy return, being accused before Aretas, the king of the Arabians, fleeing from city to city, pursued of all men, hated as a forsaker of the laws, and being had in abomination as an open enemy of his country and countrymen, he was cast out into Egypt. Thus he that had driven many out of their country perished in a strange land, retiring to the Lacedaemonians, and thinking there to find succor by reason of his kindred.
And he that had cast out many unburied, well, let's just pull this apart here for a second. If you're unburied and you're being cast out, that means you're alive. Yeah, I mean, because otherwise you're just flopping a dead body, and nobody really cares, And he that had cast out many unburied had none to mourn for him, nor any solemn funerals at all, nor sepulchre with his fathers. Now when this that was done came to the king's car, did he drive a Maserati? He thought that Judea had revolted, whereupon, removing out of Egypt in a furious mind, he took the city by force of arms, and commanded his men of war not to spare such as they met, and to slay such as went up upon the houses.
Kill them all, let God sort them out?
Yeah, something along those lines, that's for sure.
Thus there was killing of young and old, making away of men, women, and children, slaying of virgins and infants. Oh, so he's a dick. And there were destroyed within the space of 3 whole days 80,000. That's an awful lot.
80,000.
4 times 20,000. 80,000 people? They whacked 80,000 people in 3 days.
Sounds good to me.
That's quite the body count. Whereof 40,000 were slain in the conflict, and no fewer sold than slain. Oh, so they're into slavery too. Cool. Yet was he not content with this, but presumed to go into the most holy temple of all the world, Menelens, that traitor to the laws, and to his own country being his guide. These are some serious assholes.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah, 16. Wow. Got a little farther ahead of me than I thought. And taking the holy vessels with polluted hands, dun dun dun, and with profane hands pulling down the things that were dedicated by other kings to the augmentation and glory and honor of the place, he gave them away. And so haughty was Antiochus in mind, that he considered not that the Lord was angry for a while for the sins of them that dwelt in the city, and therefore his eye was not upon the place. Okay, so this is like the Babylonians coming and taking over again, that we've heard about so many times before. I guess, I don't know.
Kind of like the same thing over and over.
Yeah. For they had not been formerly wrapped in many sins, this man, as soon as he had come, had forthwith been scourged and put back from his presumption, as Heliodorus was, whom Seleucus the king sent to view the treasury.
I know. Aside from the phrasing, It's kind of hard to understand. Nevertheless, God did not choose the people for the place's sake, but the place for the people's sake, and therefore the place itself that was partaken with them, of the adversity that happened to the nation, did afterward communicate in the benefits sent from the Lord, and as it was forsaken in the wrath of the Almighty, so again the great Lord, being reconciled, it was set up with all glory. Like, all of a sudden God's here. What the hell? So when Antiochus had carried out the temple 1,800 talents, he departed in all haste unto Antiochia, weening in his pride to make the land navigable, and the sea passable by foot, Such was the haughtiness of his mind.
Yeah, you got me. And he left governors to vex the nation at Jerusalem, Philip for his country, a Phrygian, and for manners more barbarous than he that set him there. And at Gazerum, Andronicus, and besides Menelans, who worse than all the rest bare a heavy hand over the citizens, having a malicious mind against his countrymen, the Jews. He sent also that detestable ringleader, Apollonius, with an army of 22,000, so 22,000 or 20,002. Seems weirdly vague. Commanding him to slay all those that were in their best age and to sell the women and the younger sort. Your women.
Yes.
I want to buy them.
It's not acceptable in this day and age. Who, coming to Jerusalem and pretending peace, did forbear till the holy day of the Sabbath, when taking the Jews, keeping holy day, he commanded his men to arm themselves. And so he slew all of them that were gone to the celebrating of the Sabbath, and running through the city with weapons slew great multitudes. But Judas Maccabeus, with 9 others, or thereabouts, withdrew himself into the wilderness, and lived in the mountains after the manner of beasts with his company, who fed on herbs continually, lest they should be partakers of the pollution. And that's the end.
Yeah.
What? So people come in, kill a bunch of people, enslave a bunch of people, and 10 guys go off into the woods and eat herbs.
Sounds
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of God. Man, I really wish we could put a specific date on any of this shit. And to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympus. That would put this during the Roman era. And that in Gerizim of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwell in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to talk about Jupiter, that would put this Roman era, and Rome really wasn't in that area of the world until, like 100 or so BCE. Maybe a little before that, but certainly not 400 BCE, I don't believe.
Yeah, no, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots, lucky bastards, and had to do with women within the circuits of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days, or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. A little anti-Semitic, no?
Yeah. There was I used to work with this gal who was a very devout Mormon. Wonderful person, but, she was a devout Mormon. And we were talking about something, and she looked at me one time and said, you don't need whores at a party to have a good time. And I'm like, yeah, you do. It really helps.
I grew up around a lot of Mormons, and the Mormon girls had somewhat of a reputation.
Well, she was a good Mormon the way Mormons are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with her, and every couple of months in the warmer weather, I'll shave my head. And she hadn't seen me when I'd shaved my head, and I walked into the break room one day, throw my lunch in the fridge, and she saw me with a bald head and her eyes got as big as saucers, and she just reached her hand up and started stroking my head. And I looked at her and I said, "Careful, you keep that up and I'm liable to spit at you." No idea what the hell I was trying to imply with that comment. As awful as that comment is.
Oh, that's too funny.
It's just like, just no idea. I really wish I could capture that moment, because she's just like, "Oh, wow." It just, without even saying a word, asking me or anything, she just goes stroke on my head.
Oh, yeah. A freshly shaved head? People can't resist.
Yeah,
they just can't resist.
She certainly couldn't. And in the day of the king's birth, every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. Okay, so let's say the king was born on the 25th of, what we would now call July. Does that mean on the 25th of every month they had to have a party to honor the king, even though his birthday would only be in July? That's the way that reads.
That's like 12 birthday parties a year. Lucky bastard.
Yeah. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. So, he's telling the Jews, do shit you don't like, and he's telling other cities, you guys can do the shit that you have no prohibitions about doing. I'm not seeing how this makes him that much more dastardly than he already is.
Not at all. And God loves a good barbecue.
Yep. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery.
For there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, whom they had openly led round about the city, the babes handing at their breasts. They cast them down headlong from the wall. And others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly, being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together, because they made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. Now I beseech those that read this book, that they be not discouraged for these calamities, but that they judge those punishments not to be for destruction, but for chastening of our nation. It's going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt me.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. No.
Yeah. Okay. For it is a token of his great goodness when wicked doers are not suffered any long time, but forthwith punished. For not as with other nations, whom the Lord patiently forbeareth to punish. So, you're special because God chooses to punish you right away, unlike those other fucksticks who don't believe in him, so he just ignores him. That's, man, that's
really abusive.
Yeah, well, that's also like a job I had where I was complaining that, I was always the only one being sent off to do work in other departments. And they were like, yes, but you're the only one we can trust to actually do the job. And I'm like, but my punishment is I have to go off, do this other job, then go back to my department and do the shit that's supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't grasp that this was a bit of an issue with me.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
You mean I commented here?
Yeah. Till they be come to the fullness of their sins, so dealeth he with us.
I should be so lucky.
Yeah. Lest that being come to the height of sin, afterwards he should take vengeance of us.
And therefore he never withdraweth his mercy from us, and though he punish with adversity, yet doth he never forsake his people. But let this that we are at spoken be for a warning unto us, and now will we come to the declaring of the matter in a few words. Really? Brevity, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Eleazar, one of the principal scribes, an aged man and of a well-favored countenance, was constrained to open his mouth and to eat swine's flesh. Bacon.
Yeah, that works for me.
Nice little ham.
Yeah. But he, choosing rather to die gloriously, if you gorge yourself to death on bacon, that is a pretty glorious death, I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah.
Then to live stained with such an abomination, spit it forth, and came of his own accord, according to the dormant.
Phrasing.
As it behooved them to come,
Hey, phrasing!
that are resolute to stand out against such things as are not lawful for the love of life to be tasted.
Phrasing.
But they that had the charge of that wicked feast, for the old acquaintance they had with the man, taking him aside, besought him to bring the flesh of his own provision. I don't know. Such as was lawful for him to use, and make as if he did eat of the flesh taken from the sacrifice commanded by the king. So it's like, we're going to take your lunch, we're going to sacrifice it, but not really, we're going to feed it to you? Is that what this is about?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
That in so doing he might be delivered from death, and for the old friendship with him find favor. Wait a minute. Does he have to accept Jay-Z as his loaded saber there, or what?
That's what it's kind of sounded like.
Kind of sounds like that. But he began to consider discreetly, as he became his age, and the excellency of his ancient years, and the honor of his grey head, whereupon was come... for a bastard... and his most honest education from a child, or rather the holy law made and given by God. Therefore he answered accordingly, and willed them straightways to send him to the grave. For it becometh not our age, said he, in any wise to dissemble, whereby many young persons might think that Eleazar, being 80 years old and 10, so that's like 90,
Yeah.
was now gone to a strange religion. Right out of left field.
Yep.
Fuck.
And so they, through mine hypocrisy and desire to live a little time and a moment longer, should be deceived by me, and I get a stain to mine old age and make it abominable. Who the fuck is saying this shit and why?
It's mustard. It'll wash out.
Yeah. Little Club Soda fix that. For though the present time I should be delivered from the punishment of men, yet should I not escape the hand of the Almighty, neither alive nor dead. That would make you a zombie. Wherefore now, manfully changing this life, I will shew myself such an one as mine age requireth. Well, we used to we would wear an onion in our belt because it was the style at the time.
Back in my day.
Yes.
And leave a notable example to such as be young to die willingly and courageously for the honorable and holy laws. And when he had said these words, immediately he went to the torment. They that led him, changing the good will they bear him a little before into hatred. This is really awkwardly phrased.
Yeah.
Because the foresaid speeches proceeded, as they thought, from a desperate mind. But when he was ready to die with stripes, he groaned and said, It is manifest unto the Lord that hath the holy knowledge, that whereas I might have been delivered from death, I now endure sore pains in body by being beaten, but in soul am well content to suffer these things because I fear him. And thus this man died, leaving his death as an example of noble courage and a memorial of virtue, not only unto young men, but unto all his nation. Okay.
Yeah.
Some kind of scapegoat or something?
I don't know, because, I mean, the whole thing, the phrase, immediately he went to the torment, sounds like, well, he died and was sent to hell. And then you get all this other weird gibberish going on about different things, and I think we've got a case of where they were just pulling shit out of their ass as they went along.
Yeah, they seem to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
2 Mac 7's only 42 lines.
Yeah, but I'm...
and it starts with, it came to pass.
Yeah, I'm starting to fade, so...
All right.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fosnuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.